Hello, people. So, earlier on today, I did a short, and it was about freedom, fluidity, performance. That was the kind of title. But the subject matter, the content that I was talking about, was how to free yourself up to allow yourself to achieve optimal performance, to be the best that you can possibly be, and to also enjoy the process. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that in detail because shorts are short, I mean, it was under 3 minutes. And what I didn't touch on was the impact that you're having by the personal internal conversation you're having with yourself. And that is your subconscious. You are speaking directly to your subconscious. So I'm going to go back to the short where I talked about, firstly, when you're feeling apprehensive before an event. So, if you're going to be speaking at work, or you're going in for a test, or you're going into competition. So when I used to compete as a fighter, there was this time that you were in this holding place where you were waiting to be called to come to the ring. And there was this kind of 15-minute window where you knew that in the next 15 minutes you were going to be going to the ring to fight. And it's interesting, as a fighter and as a coach, and a human being, I experienced, paying attention to what's going on around you. I saw many a fight won and lost in that 15 minutes because the individual got in their head and the doubt started to take over and the fear started to kick in, Fear, false evidence appearing real. Hasn't happened yet, but you're already responding and reacting as if it's going to happen. Then it becomes a reality, right? So I remember so many different incidents, but I remember a fighter warming up on the pads, and he was saying to his coach, I just don't feel like I've got any power. I don't know, I feel flat. I feel, and he was just caught up in his head and all these things that were going on. And I'm assuming that some of that was due to maybe poor preparation. He'd missed some certain days and weeks, of training. Or it might just have been the fact that he just didn't know how to take control of the situation and turn those kind of internal voices off. And so a little a little thing that I used, and I've used it for a long time now, is just in that period just before I'm going to go out and perform, right now, in that period before I'm going to go out and speak to an audience, go to a meeting, etc. I just start to run this little internal conversation with myself, and it's very simple. I just tell myself, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. And I think about things that I enjoy and that make me excited. And I run it over and over again. And it's really interesting. It completely frees me up. And I think part of that is because you're connecting with your subconscious. You've got your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And the subconscious in the moment doesn't really know what's real. So I think when I'm running through that process of telling myself I'm excited, the subconscious is like, yeah, I'm excited. And you focus on what needs to be done. So that's the first thing. So I hope that's of some value. The second thing I talked about is like connecting with yourself and seeing yourself. And I do this thing where I look in the mirror and I really look at myself, and I just tell myself, I like, love, and respect myself. And I look at myself and I say it with absolute meaning. And it's funny. I remember I was in a Meisner acting course many moons ago, and one of the instructors or teachers, whatever you want to call them, sort of pulled me out, and he was like, I can't really understand who you are. Like, you're very sort of protected and stoic, and what do you think of yourself? And I said this to him. I said, well, I like, love, and respect myself. And he went, like, love, and respect? Like, what a load of nonsense. He was like, acting's all about vulnerability and a bunch of other stuff. And he was like basically telling me that I was never going to be a good actor because he just felt that he couldn't peel away the kind of layers to get to me on a deeper level. The problem was, or is, that at that point in my life, I'm very clear about who I am. I've had up until that point, this is about 10 years ago, already had a interesting journey, and I'd already put myself into some very interesting situations, some of which were quite dangerous, especially as a fighter. And so in that, during that journey, I found out who I was. When you compete, especially in a combat sport, there's no hiding. When you step through those ropes and it's just you and your opponent, and the referee steps back, there's no hiding because it's actually you and you. You're not only fighting him, sometimes you're fighting yourself. So going into something where somebody was trying to break me down, to build me up, was interesting because I'm like, I know who I am, and I'm here to work on the craft now. And so that was an interesting process. But I've always been very clear. I like, love, and respect myself, and I truly do. And I suggest, I recommend that you try this. Take a moment, take a look at yourself. When's the last time you really just paused and just really looked at yourself, had a conversation with yourself, like get really clear about what it is you want, what it is you like, what it is you don't like, but knowing that, no matter what, you like, love, and respect yourself. There's an interesting thing where sometimes the nicest things that you'll hear on any day, in any week, in a year, is the things that you tell yourself. And, sometimes you've not only got to stand up, you've got to pick yourself up sometimes because, it can be lonely on a daily, weekly basis sometimes, especially when you're working towards stuff that requires you to remove yourself from the masses and just get focused and get on with stuff. And the last thing I talked about in this short was, if you're going into a work meeting or you're going out to speak to an audience, be it one person or 10,000 people, something that I've always found of use is that my focus is the audience. My focus is adding value. My focus is on what can I bring to this individual, this group of people that can help, that can, make their day better, brighter. And so automatically when I'm focusing on who I'm speaking to and what I'm there to do and what I'm wanting to add and the value I'm wanting to bring, I'm not focusing on myself. I'm not thinking, is my hair okay? Am I wearing the right outfit? Do I like my voice? Am I nervous? What if I forget this? What if I forget that? It's it's a completely different energy and a completely different space that you find yourself in. The other thing I do as well is I don't, when I'm asked to speak, I speak from bullet points. I kind of get clear about what I'm going to be talking about, and I'll just put like bullet points, and I kind of set a time, like maybe 2 to 4 minutes on this subject, etc. So I kind of wrap it up, because when you have experience, when you have expertise, you don't need to work from a PowerPoint. You really don't, because it's all there. You have to trust yourself, and because you know your stuff. And again, that gives, when you trust yourself and you believe in yourself, freedom, fluidity, performance, all aligns, because you're just excavating your journey, your experience, your expertise, and then you're delivering it to your audience, and it's all there. You don't need to have it on a PowerPoint so you can just read what you've written, just a bullet point. It could be one word goes up on a board if you really need to use a visual screen. And you speak from experience and expertise, and I find it so much more engaging and interesting and impactful when somebody can just do that, because you truly know that they know their stuff. So yeah, in a longer form, I just wanted to touch on what I was speaking about in the short, and how, these things connect with our subconscious. and our consciousness. So the subconscious is where you speak to with, I'm excited, and it doesn't know. It kind of thinks, hey, I'm excited. And then consciously, we're excited, and we're not caught up in the, the doom, the gloom, and what could happen, and what about this, and what about that. We're just in the moment, we're excited, we're free, and we're ready to go, and we're ready to do, and we're ready to have an adventure, and we're ready to explore, and we're ready to do our best. And I'm going to leave you on one thing. One thing I learned as a fighter is that, win or lose, if you go out and give your all, it doesn't matter if you don't get the decision, if you don't actually win the fight. Obviously you want to win the fight, but when you go out and give your all, you never lose. You're always a winner when you give 100%. When you go out and you give 50%, 60%, and you know deep down that you could have done more, you know that you were caught up in your head, and even if you win the fight under those terms, you're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to be fulfilled, because you know that you coasted, that you could have done more and you just didn't. And it wasn't as fun because you were so caught up in your head rather than being fluid. So I hope this is of some value. I hope that you're having a good week, and I will see you on the next one.